Sega, what are you doing? What in the hell are you doing right now? You're disappointing a lot of people with your decisions. You're disappointing a lot of people with your business practices because a lot of people, such as myself, have an affinity for you. Whether you want to realize this or not, Sega is still a name value that holds a place in a lot of people's hearts. Growing up, you were like a father to me. When I would get in trouble with my real parents, I would go into my room and I would dive into the world of Sega, the Sega Genesis. My dad would come in there and say, "I'm gonna take away the Sega." He would call it Sega. And I never really understood that why, but it was because he was jealous. He was jealous because you were helping raise me. And to see what you have become now and to see what your business decisions are going forward, it's just mind-blowing to me. So I'm here to save you. I am here to fix what you are doing, to give you short-term plans, to give you long-term plans, and how to become a video game titan once again, because all the groundwork is there. You just need someone to come along and say, hey, this is what we need to do. If you would like to make me president of your company, fine. Go ahead and do that. I can work remotely from home and boss you guys around. And I know some people from Sega follow me. I've worked with Sega before on the channel. I know all their PR people follow me. So someone is going to see this from Sega because I'm going to tag you guys in it too, because that's just the kind of person I am. And I feel like people will resonate with what I say. They will like what I say, and they will also have ideas of their own. So make sure you share this video around, share it in your little Sega Facebook groups and all that stuff, because we together are going to fix Sega. I have short-term plans, I have long-term plans. This is something I've thought about for a very long time. So without any further ado, let's just jump into how we are going to save you and how, more importantly, I'm going to save you. So first and foremost, let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about the easy money, the quick money, because in my mind, easy money is the best money. And it's money that you could just make without having to do a lot of effort. And I see one thing right off the bat that just blows my mind. I don't understand why this hasn't been done yet. Back on the Xbox 360, back on the PlayStation 3, you had a lot of digital games available from your catalog of games. You had games like Daytona USA, Virtua Fighter 2, Fighting Vipers, Knights, Crazy Taxi, a variety of games that were available on these systems for digital download. Yet there's a system that people like Sega games on it, because you've done a bunch of Sega Ages stuff on there, yet they're not available on this system, and that is the Nintendo Switch. And I have to sit here and think and ask myself, why? Why in the name of all that is holy have these games not been ported over to the Nintendo Switch? It is a very simple thing you could do with this, thus making it easy money, as we just talked about, because you just take those games and you port them to the Switch. It's very easy. You can also do something to reinvigorate interest in those Xbox arcade games and the PlayStation 3 games by releasing a physical copy across all platforms. So you digitally put those games on the Switch, and then you also make a physical copy of those games on the Switch, call it a Sega Classics collection or something like that, not just Sega Genesis, because that seems to be the only system you think about, but you release this on the Switch with a physical and a digital copy, and then you also do a limited physical copy on the PlayStation and Xbox systems. People will buy those games. There's a reason why people say do 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 Daytona. Like there's semblance with those games. There's love of those games. There's passion of those games. And the fact that they're just stuck on that system and those marketplaces as the only way to play those games is ridiculous. It's such easy money. And sticking with the easy money stuff, why are we not exploiting our back catalog of games? And there's a multitude of ways you could do this. When you look at the Switch, because really that's the system you've been focused on. So that's how it, sort of pertains to this. You haven't really done many classic things beside things like the Sega Genesis Classics collection across all platforms. I'm talking about things like the Sega Ages stuff. All right, you've got some choice cuts in there. You had M2 come along and take some of these choice cuts and really make great versions of these games. You went up to virtual racing on the Switch, and then you stopped. You stopped. That was, oh yeah, you know what? That's all we're gonna do for the Sega Ages stuff. Like, why? You just started getting interesting because you're re-releasing games from a time frame that you just don't act like exist. You act like these games don't exist. You act like the Sega Genesis exists. The Dreamcast kind of exists in a little bit. There's a certain few games that always get re-released, but you never go deeper than that. You have other systems. You have the Sega Master System. You have the Sega Saturn that you just act like doesn't exist. You act like this system does not exist. And it's ridiculous to me. You have all of your Sega arcade games, you know, the whole thing that kind of made you a dominant company because you were offering these cutting edge arcade games and then giving them home ports, simulating the arcade experience at home for the first time ever. But you stopped at virtual racing. That blows my mind. The back catalog of your stuff is one of your strengths, okay? Look at the success that all of these other companies are having re-releasing their old stuff. Square Enix, Capcom. These companies are focused on re-releasing their old stuff, yet Sega, you act like you have one system. You act like you have Sega Genesis, Sonic Origins Collection. Hey, look, the same Sonic the Hedgehog games that we've re-released a million freaking times, you could play them once again, but we've added widescreen and a couple little quality of life improvements. Speaking of Sonic, where the hell is a Sonic Adventure collection? Once again, Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast was one of the most important games, I think, of the Dreamcast. It had that holy shit moment where you're sitting there, you're running across the bridge, and then the killer whale is flying up like Free Willy, trying to kill you. Why are we not tapping into more choice cuts on the Sonic the Hedgehog side of things? You did this on the GameCube. You did this on the PlayStation 2. There are various Sonic collections of some deeper cuts of Sonic the Hedgehog games that you just act like don't exist. And it's ridiculous. These games will sell. This is all easy money stuff. This is all stuff that already exists, that minimal work can be put into and see success and see dollars. Let's not even get into the fact that now there's a working Sega Saturn emulator that runs pretty damn good on the Nintendo Switch, yet you're not putting Sega Saturn games on the Switch. I don't understand this logic. I don't understand this at all. It doesn't make sense. And really, all of those things I just talked about are simple things, are all things that can be accomplished with minimal work. You know, hiring a couple programmers to port these games over to the Switch is not a very taxing thing comparative to some of the other things you're doing. And I'm not really going to talk about Atlas in this video, although Atlas is owned by Sega, but many of these things are applicable to Atlas because there are so many Persona games that are stuck on the systems that they came out on, and people want to play those games. But looking beyond that, now we're going to get into the more medium stuff, the stuff that's a little bit more difficult. You got to put a little bit more money into it, but once again, it's all about brand recognition. It's all about getting people excited about the Sega brand and thus wanting to look at the long-term stuff, the more expensive stuff that we'll talk about at the end of the video. So in the intermediate, I have questions. Where is a Dreamcast Mini? Where is a Dreamcast Mini? And people will sit there and say, oh, well, you know, it would have to be very expensive. No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. You simply have the shell of the system. You have what's inside of the system. Like anything can run a Dreamcast right now. All these Chinese clone handheld systems that are coming out all run the Dreamcast fine. And they're all budget price systems too. Under $100 for most of them. You're telling me that Sega, the company that made the Dreamcast, the company that had the Dreamcast as a budget price system when it first came out, can't figure out a way to make a Dreamcast Mini? And like the money is right there. You have the system itself for $100. Comes with like 20 games from the Dreamcast era. You can put these games on a freaking micro SD card. It doesn't really matter. And micro SD cards do not cost a lot of money. There are obviously a million Sega Dreamcast emulators out there that all work very, very well. If you want to build one in-house, you can do that. Or you could just use one of the open source ones and just give them credit because that's all they really care about. Then, of course, you have the fact that you can make a lot of money on accessories and variants for this system. You can have the white Dreamcast model that was a standard thing. You can have the black Dreamcast model that was the sports model. Maybe costs a little bit more because it's a limited edition. Controllers. You can make money on the controllers, charging like 30 bucks a pop for these extra controllers that, let's be real, they're not going to cost a lot of money. VMU stuff. You could have VMUs. Obviously, you wouldn't need a VMU on the system itself, but you could have some functional ones or just non-functional ones that just look really fun as sort of a collector's item. Fighting pads for this system as well. Like, there's so much money to be made on a Dreamcast Mini because it's a system that a lot of people didn't get to experience. And it's a system that if Sega came along and acknowledged it, much like the Sega Saturn, people would be excited for this. People would be interested in this because these games still hold up. These games still are playable today. It's not like the N64 era where you have to do a million things to the graphics of the game in order to make them relevant today. You don't have to do much. It's right there. It's right there. Yes, it would cost a little bit of money, and I understand that. That's why it's in the medium tier, because we're taking the money that we made from the easy tier, and now we're utilizing it in the medium tier. Another thing, why this hasn't been done, you kind of did it. You dipped your toe into the water with this, with Golden Axe, Death Adder's Revenge, and then you said, oh, okay, that's all we're doing. It was a little outrun, put our toe in the water. Why are we not linking up with all of these companies like Arcade 1UP, like iArcade, and putting classic Sega arcade games on these systems? You're gonna tell me a House of the Dead cabinet from Arcade 1UP, you're gonna tell me a Daytona USA arcade cabinet from Arcade 1UP wouldn't sell like hotcakes? This is almost the easy money thing, but you obviously have to do a little bit more to make sure that the games work. You know, House of the Dead has a light gun. Daytona USA, you would need a steering wheel, so you would have to do a little bit more with these. So that's why it's not included in the easy tier. But essentially, this is just licensing stuff. This is licensing stuff. You can get hands-on with it if you want to make sure that it's a quality product, or you can hope that Arcade 1UP does what they need to do. Or companies like iArcade. The iArcade is a very strong system. It's a very capable system that can run things up to Dreamcast on it. Guess what? A lot of your arcade hardware was pre-Dreamcast stuff. A lot of those games that we grew up playing was pre-Dreamcast stuff that would look great on this system. And they're banger titles that are still relevant. Once again, it kind of goes back to looking at our back catalog. Why are we ignoring this back catalog when we were such a strong company? We, because I'm the new president, we were such a strong company when we had the arcade game on lock. And yeah, arcades aren't a big deal anymore. Obviously, the home console experience has, sort of surpassed that. But the people who remember the arcade era are the people who have the disposable income to throw at you right now because they want to relive the nostalgic things. I mean, look at my arcade room pretty much. It's pretty much a nostalgic room for me to go back to a time frame where I would be in my room and Dad would come in and say, "Taking away the Sega." It's not a Sega, it's a Sega Genesis. "I'm taking away the Sega." And then you were my father. You were my father during that time frame. So the fact that we're not utilizing these connections, that we just dipped our toe into the arcade stuff when home arcade stuff is so prevalent right now, you can even make your own damn home arcade stuff. There is enough companies out there to where you could look at what they're doing and figure out how you could do it better. But no, super games. And now we're getting into the final portion of this, which is obviously the more long-term stuff, because we've already made money. We've already made that easy money. With that easy money, we then transferred it over to the medium money, the one that we got to work a little bit harder for. But now that medium money is also making us money. So we have two different avenues making us money, which brings us to the third thing, the long-term game. I'm not going to sit here and say you need to release another console because that would be just ridiculous. You don't need to release another console. I know that there are petitions, the Sega Spartan, all this shit out there. You don't need to do that. There's no point. The hardware market is already full enough. There's enough players in it. It really suits everyone's needs, whether you want a home console, whether you want a portable console, whether you want a hybrid console. There's no reason to get into the console market. So what do you do? What do you do? Do you do things like these super games? No. Because this super game is going to be a waste of money. It's not going to be very successful. You might get some people in the door because you're using prominent IPs that, people resonate with, Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi. But in the long term, it's going to be a waste of money. How many free-to-play games have we seen come along that just fall flat on their face? For every success, for every, Fortnite, there's 10 games in its path that didn't do what they set out to do. So what do? We take a look at our classic games, and once again, we do things like re-releasing them. But we don't do them sort of like, what Square Enix did with Final Fantasy VII across all platforms, just polishing up the graphics. We do things like rebuilding them from the ground up, like Final Fantasy VII Remake. We do things like taking our IPs and making new iterations of our IPs. Because you're sitting on a lot of IPs, you're sitting on a lot of money, a lot of franchises that people, they resonate with. And obviously this is a bigger undertaking. You have to put lots of money into making these games AAA experiences, but you used to be the king of AAA experiences. You used to have your finger on the pulse with these games, and you were right up there releasing banger titles alongside of the competition that sold really well. A quality game is probably going to sell. A quality game is probably going to make you a bit more money than a free-to-play game, because the free-to-play stuff is all contingent on it getting a user base at the start. And if it doesn't get that user base at the start, more than likely, it's going to fall away. It's just how the free-to-play marketplace works. And I feel like you as a company understand that. You as a company get that. But for some reason, you're shying away from those single-player experiences, those single-player narrative games, and going towards what you perceive to be the easy money. And I think that's the problem here. You perceive this free-to-play thing as a large investment that you'll make your money back and then 10 times more. And I don't think that's going to happen. And I'm worried. I am worried about the status of your company because I don't think it's going to be healthy. You know, Capcom was the laughingstock of the video game industry like a decade plus ago, really almost 20 years ago, but like towards the middle of the 2000s up until like 2011-ish, they were the laughingstock. They were the company that everyone thought was going to get bought out. They were the company that everyone assumed was dead upon arrival. But what did they do? They turned the ship around. They came up with new IPs. They came up with new things for their current IPs to make them feel fresh again. And I feel like you just don't. And that perplexes me. That just, I don't understand why. Like, there's no rhyme or reason for it. If it's a capital issue, if it's an issue of, you know, needing more funds and resources, I just gave you a beautiful roadmap with your classic stuff that requires minimal effort in order to get capital, in order to get revenue coming into the company with some easy things and some medium things. And then we can focus on the bigger things. Then we can focus on revamping our old IPs and, you know, building them from the ground up and making new IPs and new experiences that people can't get or maybe never thought of getting with classic IPs or new IPs. Like, there's so many types of video games out there that can succeed, but you have to have the money and the resources to do it. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket and assume that this big new super games thing is going to lead you to the promised land, when I don't think it will. I don't think it will. So I have been talking for a very long time now. My voice is a little bit dry, but I you know, it's because there's a lot of passion behind this. There's a lot of, it's something that I think people can see. You know, I think a lot of people, a lot of Sega fans will agree with me. And whether you want to admit it or not, there are still a lot of Sega fans out there. You know, I consider myself to be a Sega fan because I wrote a damn book on your company. I wrote a book on the Sega 32X, and it did well. You know, people have fond nostalgia for that system. That's another system that you act like doesn't exist, even though Virtua Fighter on there and Knuckles Chaotix and Virtual Racing Deluxe, these are versions of the games that are only available on there with unique things for them. But I digress. I've talked too much. Sega, I'm here to help you. Okay, I made this video because I care. I made this video because I feel like I have an insight into the industry on the more ground level, not the corporate level, but the ground level. Things that you can do to help you guys succeed in the future, because everyone wants to see you succeed. Everyone wants to see you come back with a full force. And maybe things like this Sonic movie stuff that's giving you guys money, which that's a whole nother thing we could go into, is the entertainment side of things with things like cartoons and more merchandise and stuff like that. Maybe that's clouded your vision a little bit and given you a little too much confidence going into things. But at the end of the day, you have to go back to your home base. You have to go back to what got you into the game in the first place. And that's video games. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.